The sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the morning silence as Ryan Grayson's sleek Bentley rolled to a stop at the edge of Willow Creek Farm. A far cry from the gleaming skyscrapers of Manhattan, the sprawling acres of corn and wheat stretched before him like an alien landscape. He'd built a tech empire worth billions, but none of that mattered now. He was just a man running from burnout, seeking something real. Ryan shut off the engine and sat for a moment, running his hand through his perfectly styled dark hair. His therapist had called it an existential crisis. The board called it a sabbatical. He called it survival. After collapsing during a shareholders' meeting last month, the message was clear: change or break completely. "You must be the new hand," a gruff voice called out as Ryan stepped from the car, his Italian leather shoes immediately coated in dust. Frank Johnson, the owner of Willow Creek Farm, approached with a weathered face that had seen decades under the sun. His calloused hand extended in greeting nearly crushed Ryan's manicured one. "Ryan Gray," he said, using the shortened version of his name he'd created for this experiment. "Thanks for the opportunity." Frank's eyes narrowed at Ryan's designer clothes. "City boy, huh? Well, hope you're ready to work. Those fancy threads won't last a day here." Ryan nodded, shouldering his duffel bag. "I'm a quick learner." "You'll stay in the farmhand quarters behind the main house. Breakfast at 5, workday starts at 5:30, Frank explained, leading Ryan across the yard. "My wife, Martha, runs the house, and my daughter helps with the books and the farmers' market sales." As if summoned by her mention, the screen door of the farmhouse swung open. Ryan looked up and felt something shift in his chest, a small tremor that would later reveal itself as the first warning sign of an earthquake about to reshape his carefully constructed world. "Dad, the tractor's making that sound again," called a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, clipboard in hand. When she noticed Ryan, she paused on the porch steps. "Oh, you must be the new hire. Grace, this is Ryan Gray," Frank said. "Ryan, my daughter Grace." Grace Johnson's eyes were the exact shade of the wheat fields at sunset. They assessed Ryan with a practical intelligence that made him straighten his posture instinctively. "Hope you know your way around engines," she said, walking toward them. Her faded jeans and flannel shirt couldn't hide an easy confidence Ryan recognized from board meetings with the most capable executives. "We need all hands on deck with harvest coming." "I'm adaptable," Ryan replied, suddenly self-conscious of his $500 haircut and manicured nails that had never seen a day of manual labor. Grace's lips quirked. "We'll see about that." She turned to her father. "I'll show him to the quarters. You should check on that irrigation pump before it completely gives out." As Frank headed off, Ryan found himself following Grace across the yard, strangely intimidated by this farm girl who couldn't possibly know that last year's Fortune magazine had featured him as one of the world's most influential business leaders. "So what brings a guy like you to farm work?" Grace asked, glancing back at him. Ryan had prepared for this question. Needed a change. Office life wasn't cutting it anymore. Most people take a vacation. They don't switch to 14-hour days of physical labor. "I'm not most people," Ryan replied simply. Grace showed him to a small but clean room with a single bed, dresser, and desk. "Bathrooms down the hall. Dinner's at 7. If you're late, you might miss it." Her eyes flicked to his watch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than most cars. "You might want to leave that in a drawer, along with whatever else you brought that you don't want ruined." After she left, Ryan sat on the bed, looking around at the sparse quarters that would be his home for the next 3 months. This was further from his penthouse lifestyle than he had imagined. He'd expected the physical challenge, but hadn't anticipated the immediate sense that he was completely out of his depth. He changed into jeans and a simple t-shirt, stashed his watch in the dresser, and took a deep breath. For the first time in 15 years, Ryan Grayson, CEO of Grayson Technologies, wasn't in control of everything around him. And strangely, that felt like exactly what he needed. Morning came brutally early with a sharp knock at 4:45 a.m. "Rise and shine, city boy," called Frank's voice through the door. Ryan groaned. every muscle protesting the previous day's crash course in farm labor. He'd spent hours moving hay bales, mending fences, and learning to operate equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum compared to the sleek technology he usually handled. Breakfast was hearty and silent, with Frank issuing the day's orders between bites of eggs and toast. Grace was noticeably absent. "She handles our stand at the farmer's market on Thursdays," Martha explained when she caught Ryan glancing at the empty chair. "That girl works harder than anyone I know." By midday, Ryan's hands were blistered, his back ached in places he didn't know could ache, and he'd gained a newfound respect for the food supply chain he'd previously only considered in terms of investment opportunities. Not giving up yet. Frank asked when he found Ryan wincing as he filled water troughs. "It would take more than this," Ryan replied, though privately he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. His assistant was handling his minimal communication with the office, but he felt strangely disconnected, like an astronaut cut loose from his spacecraft. When Grace returned that evening, the farm truck loaded with empty crates, Ryan was sitting on the porch steps, gingerly applying antiseptic to his blistered palms. "First day battle scars?" she asked, hopping down from the truck with an energy he couldn't fathom after a full day's work. "Nothing serious," he managed, trying to hide a particularly nasty blister. Grace dropped beside him, taking his hand without asking. Her touch was gentle but matter-of-fact as she examined his palm. "You need gloves, good ones." She released his hand. "Dad means well, but he forgets not everyone's been doing this since childhood." "I'll be fine," Ryan said automatically, the same response he gave when board members questioned his punishing work schedule. Grace gave him a look that saw straight through the bravado. "I'm heading to the supply store tomorrow. I'll pick some up for you." Before he could object, she added, "Consider it an investment in farm productivity." The practical framing made him smile, always thinking of the bottom line. "Someone has to," she replied, and for the first time, Ryan noticed the worry lines between her brows. Farms this size don't exactly run themselves or turn huge profits. Ryan nodded, a familiar analytical part of his brain calculating operating costs versus market prices before he consciously shut it down. He wasn't here to solve business problems. He was here to remember what it felt like to be human. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan settled into the rhythm of farm life. Each morning brought new aches but also new skills. He learned to drive the tractor without stalling, to identify which chickens were the troublemakers, and to predict rain from the way the air felt against his skin. His hands hardened, his complexion bronzed, and the perpetual tension in his shoulders began to ease. He also found himself increasingly aware of Grace's presence. She moved through the farm with purpose, equally comfortable negotiating with distributors on the phone or helping deliver a calf in the middle of the night. Unlike the polished, calculating women Ryan typically dated, relationships that served more as strategic partnerships than romantic connections, Grace was refreshingly direct. "You're hovering," she informed him one afternoon as they worked side by side in the vegetable garden. "Either tell me what's on your mind or find another row to weed." Ryan realized he'd been watching her hands as she efficiently separated produce from invaders. "I was just thinking that you're good at this, all of it, born into it," she replied with a shrug, but he caught the pride in her voice. "No, it's more than that. You have a gift for systems, seeing how all the pieces work together." Grace gave him a curious look. "That's an odd way to describe farming." "Is it? From what I've seen, it's an incredibly complex operation. Resource management, logistics, risk assessment, market forecasting, you make it sound like a corporate enterprise," she said with a laugh. "Isn't it? Just with more dirt and early mornings." She sat back on her heels, studying him. "You know, for someone who claimed to be escaping office life, you sure talk like you never left it." Ryan focused on pulling a particularly stubborn weed. "Old habits." "What did you really do before this, Ryan? And don't say office work again. That's like me saying I do farm stuff." The question hung between them. Ryan had successfully avoided details about his past, deflecting personal questions from the Johnsons with vague responses. Now, looking at Grace's open face, smudged with dirt and framed by escaped tendrils of auburn hair, he felt the weight of his deception. "I worked in tech," he said finally. "Management." "So you were someone's boss," Ryan nodded, relieved to share at least a partial truth. "Something like that. Did you like it?" The question was simple but hit like a body blow. Had he liked it? He'd been so focused on success, on growth, on the next acquisition or product launch that liking his work had become irrelevant. "I was good at it," he answered carefully. Grace's eyes softened with understanding. "That's not the same thing." Before he could respond, Frank called from the barn, needing help with a delivery. The moment passed, but the conversation lingered in Ryan's mind as he hauled feed bags, wondering when he'd stopped asking himself if he enjoyed his life and started measuring it solely by achievements. That night, unable to sleep despite bone-deep fatigue, Ryan slipped out to the porch. The night sky stretched endlessly above, stars visible in a way Manhattan's light pollution never allowed. He was surprised to find Grace already there, nursing a mug of tea. Midnight thoughts. She asked, making room on the step beside her. "Something like that," he replied, settling next to her. "You, end-of-month accounts, they always keep me up." She sighed, and in the moonlight, Ryan could see the worry etching lines around her eyes. "Anything I can help with?" Grace gave a short laugh. "Unless you're secretly an agricultural economist or a rainmaker, probably not." Ryan stayed silent, acutely aware that he had the resources to solve whatever financial concerns plagued Willow Creek Farm with a single phone call. Instead, he asked, "Is it that bad?" "It's farming," she said simply. "Good years, bad years. Right now, we're somewhere in between, but the equipment is aging and we're one major repair away from real trouble." She shook her head. "Sorry, not your problem." "I don't mind," Ryan said softly. "Sometimes it helps to talk it through." Under the vast Kansas sky, Grace began explaining the farm's financial situation. Ryan listened intently, his business mind mapping out possibilities, strategies, and solutions he couldn't offer without revealing his identity. Instead, he asked questions, thoughtful ones that occasionally made Grace look at him with renewed curiosity. "For someone who escaped office life, you seem to know a lot about business models," she observed. Ryan shrugged. "I pick things up." As the conversation drifted from farm finances to childhood memories to favorite books, Ryan found himself more engaged than he'd been in any late-night discussion with venture capitalists or tech innovators. Grace spoke about the farm's legacy with such passion that he could almost see the generations of Johnsons who had worked this land before her. "You really love this place," he said as a comfortable silence fell between them. "It's home," she replied simply. "Not just a house or property, it's part of who I am." She turned to him. "Do you have somewhere like that, somewhere that feels like it's in your blood?" Ryan thought of his multiple properties, the Manhattan penthouse, the Hamptons retreat, the ski lodge in Aspen, all immaculately designed by professionals, all feeling more like high-end hotels than homes. "Not really," he admitted. "I've always been more focused on moving forward than putting down roots." Grace studied him in the moonlight. "That sounds lonely." Her words were not accusatory but filled with genuine empathy, and something in Ryan's carefully constructed walls cracked slightly. "Sometimes," he acknowledged. "But it's efficient." "Efficient," Grace repeated, amusement in her voice. "There are a lot of ways to describe a good life, Ryan. I'm not sure efficient should be one of them." She stood, stretching, and Ryan tried not to notice the graceful line of her silhouette against the star-filled sky. "Get some sleep," she advised. "Tomorrow's harvest day for the western field. You'll need your strength." As she disappeared into the house, Ryan remained on the porch, confronting the uncomfortable realization that Grace Johnson, a woman who probably hadn't set foot in a boardroom, had just delivered the most insightful performance review of his career. Harvest days were all-consuming affairs that required every available hand. Ryan worked alongside the other farmhands, local teenagers, and neighboring farmers who participated in the communal tradition of helping each other bring in crops. By evening, covered in dust and sweat, They gathered for a celebration dinner that Martha and some neighbor women had prepared, under string lights in the farmyard, with plates balanced on knees and cold beers in hand. Ryan experienced a sense of community unlike anything in his previous life. There were no hidden agendas, no strategic networking, just genuine connection born of shared labor. "You held your own out there today," Frank told him, clapping a hand on his shoulder with newfound respect. "Thanks to Grace's coaching," Ryan replied honestly. She'd patiently taught him to operate equipment, anticipate problems, and work efficiently. Frank nodded, looking across the gathering to where Grace was laughing with some of the neighbors. That girl was born with dirt under her fingernails and farming in her brain. Smart as a whip, too. Could have gone anywhere, done anything. Got a full scholarship to Kansas State for agricultural business. But she came back here, Ryan guessed. Farm was struggling. Her mother had just been diagnosed with arthritis. Grace never hesitated, deferred her acceptance, stepped right in. Frank's voice held pride tinged with regret. "Always wondered if we held her back." Ryan watched Grace across the yard, animated as she described something to an elderly couple. "She doesn't seem held back to me. She seems purposeful." Frank studied Ryan with new interest. "You're not quite what you seem, are you, son?" Before Ryan could respond, Grace approached, saving him from what was becoming a dangerously perceptive conversation. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson wants your secret to this year's corn yield," she said. As Frank moved away, she turned to Ryan. "You surviving?" "Better than surviving," he admitted. "I'm actually enjoying myself." Grace's smile warmed something in his chest. "Careful, Ryan. You might accidentally discover that there's more to life than escaping whatever you left behind in the city." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," he replied, holding her gaze a moment longer than necessary. Grace's cheeks flushed slightly and she looked away. "Come on, city boy, time you learned how farmers dance." Before he could protest, she was pulling him toward the cleared area where couples were swaying to the country music playing from someone's truck speakers. Ryan, who had taken ballroom dancing lessons specifically for charity galas, found himself laughably out of his depth with the two-stepping rhythm. "I thought you corporate types were supposed to be coordinated," Grace teased as he stepped on her boot for the third time. "Different skill set," Ryan laughed, finally relaxing into the unfamiliar dance. "In my defense, there's not much dancing in," he caught himself before saying board meetings. "In office cubicles," Grace finished for him, eyebrow raised. "Somehow I don't think that's where you spent your time, Ryan." No, you have the hands of someone who's spent most of his life clean and comfortable. You analyze everything like it's a spreadsheet. And sometimes you get this look when equipment breaks down, like you're calculating costs and efficiency losses." Her eyes held his. "Your management, all right, high-level management, I'd guess." Ryan spun her gently, buying time to compose his response. "Does it matter?" "Only if you're lying about who you are," she replied directly. The music slowed and other couples pressed closer around them. Ryan's hand rested lightly on Grace's waist and he could smell the lavender from her shampoo. "I'm not lying about who I am," he said quietly. "Just omitting my resume." Grace studied him for a long moment. "Fair enough. We all need spaces where we're not defined by what we do." Relief washed through him, followed by a pang of guilt. She was offering understanding without having all the facts. But explaining that he wasn't just some middle manager escaping burnout, but a billionaire CEO playing farmer seemed impossible without sounding either insane or condescending. As the evening progressed, Ryan found himself gravitating toward Grace, their conversations flowing effortlessly between teasing banter and genuine exchange. When the gathering finally broke up, they lingered by the porch steps, neither quite ready to end the night. "Thank you," Ryan said suddenly. "For what?" "For teaching me, for not giving up on the city boy." Grace's laugh was soft in the darkness. "You're a surprisingly quick study and you work hard. That counts for a lot around here." "Is that all that counts?" The question slipped out before he could censor it. In the dim glow from the porch light, he watched her expression shift, becoming carefully neutral. "Ryan, whatever you're looking for here, just remember it's temporary for you. This isn't a vacation romance or a countryside adventure. This is my life." The gentle warning hit him harder than he expected. "I know that. Do you? Because in a few weeks you'll go back to your real life and we'll still be here, doing exactly this every day, every season, year after year." Ryan wanted to tell her that his real life had never felt as authentic as these weeks at Willow Creek Farm, that the persona he'd built as a tech visionary sometimes felt more fictional than the simplified version of himself he presented here. Instead, he nodded. "I understand." "I didn't mean to overstep," Grace's expression softened. "You didn't, I've seen what happens when people romanticize farm life without understanding its realities." She brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Good night, Ryan." As she disappeared into the house, Ryan remained on the steps, confronting an uncomfortable truth. He was beginning to care for Grace Johnson in a way that complicated his carefully planned sabbatical. More concerning was the realization that when it ended, he wasn't entirely sure which life he'd be returning to or who he'd be when he got there. The next few days brought unseasonable rain, delaying further harvesting and trapping everyone indoors with maintenance tasks and paperwork. Ryan found himself helping Grace in the farm office, organizing invoices and inputting data into an outdated accounting system that made him wince. "This software is practically ancient," he commented, watching the program slowly process a simple calculation. Grace sighed. "Tell me about it." "But the upgrade costs more than we can justify right now." Ryan bit his tongue to keep from offering to buy her the entire software company. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, occasionally suggesting small efficiency improvements that Grace implemented with grateful surprise. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked after he showed her a spreadsheet formula that automatically calculated feed costs against projected yields. "Here and there," he replied vaguely, "just picked it up along the way." Grace gave him a look that said she wasn't buying it, but had decided to let him keep his secrets. The rain drummed steadily on the roof as they worked side by side, occasionally brushing arms or hands in the small office. By late afternoon, the tedium of data entry had them both restless. When Grace suggested checking the barn roof for leaks, Ryan eagerly agreed, grateful for physical activity after hours of desk work. The rain had subsided to a gentle drizzle as they crossed the yard. Inside the barn, the sweet smell of hay mingled with the earthy scent of livestock. Ryan followed Grace up a wooden ladder to a loft area where she pointed out several spots where water was seeping in. "We need to place buckets under those until we can get up on the roof," she explained, moving carefully across the loft. As Ryan followed, a rotted board suddenly gave way beneath his foot. He stumbled forward, crashing into Grace and sending them both tumbling into a pile of hay below. The fall wasn't far, but the shock of it left them momentarily breathless. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, realizing he had landed partially on top of her. Grace nodded, wincing slightly. "Just knocked the wind out of me." Neither moved immediately. Grace's hair had come loose from its practical ponytail, fanning across the hay in auburn waves. A smudge of dust highlighted the freckles across her nose. Ryan became acutely aware of how close their faces were, of the warmth of her body beneath his. "Ryan," she said softly, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart race. "Yes, you're crushing my arm." "Oh." He shifted quickly, embarrassed. "Sorry." As he helped her sit up, their hands remained connected a moment longer than necessary. The air between them felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Grace was the first to break the moment, brushing hay from her clothes with practical efficiency. "Well, now we know that section needs more than just roof repair." "I can fix the floorboards," Ryan offered, eager to prove useful. "I did some construction work in college." This, at least, wasn't a lie, though he omitted that it had been a summer internship designed to give him insight into the real estate development company his father was acquiring. Grace looked skeptical. "You're full of surprises, city boy." "I contain multitudes," he replied with a grin, relieved to see her smile return. As they gathered tools and materials, the easy banter resumed, but something had shifted between them, an awareness that made every accidental touch feel deliberate, every shared glance significant. That evening after dinner, Ryan found Grace on the porch again, this time with paperwork spread around her and a deeply troubled expression on her face. "Bad news?" he asked, hesitating at the door. She looked up, trying to smooth her features. Nothing unexpected, just the usual juggling act. She gathered the papers quickly, but not before Ryan caught sight of a bank letterhead and the words "Final Notice." "Grace," he said gently, "I know it's none of my business, but if the farm is in financial trouble, it's not your concern," she interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "We've weathered tough times before." Ryan sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Sometimes an outside perspective helps. In my previous work, I dealt with financial restructuring frequently." Grace gave a short, humorless laugh. "Unless you can restructure drought, equipment costs, and market fluctuations, I'm not sure how much help your corporate experience will be." "Try me," Ryan said simply. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps the growing trust between them, but Grace relented. She explained the farm's situation, how consecutive dry seasons had depleted their reserves, how a major equipment breakdown had forced them to take a loan they could barely afford, how bigger agricultural corporations were squeezing small farms like theirs out of the market. Ryan listened carefully, asking occasional questions that revealed his understanding of business fundamentals without exposing the full extent of his expertise. When she finished, he was silent for a moment, processing. "You need capital investment and market differentiation," he said finally. "Focus on what the big operations can't offer: organic practices, sustainability, direct-to-consumer models." "With what startup funds?" Grace challenged, but he could see her mind working through the possibilities. "There are agricultural grants, community-supported agriculture programs, even crowdfunding options," Ryan suggested, carefully avoiding the simplest solution that he could write a check and solve their problems instantly. As they discussed potential strategies, Grace's initial resistance gave way to cautious enthusiasm. Her intelligence and quick grasp of complex business concepts impressed Ryan, reinforcing his growing conviction that in another context, she would have been a formidable corporate leader. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "for someone who claims to have escaped office life, you seem to miss business strategy sessions." Ryan smiled ruefully. "Maybe I miss the problem-solving part, just not the politics and pressure." "And what about the power?" Grace asked perceptively. "Do you miss that?" The question caught him off guard. "What makes you think I had power?" "The way you carry yourself, the way you analyze everything, the way people on the farm naturally look to you for direction, even though you've been here less than a month." Her eyes held his steadily. "You were someone important, weren't you?" The moment for honesty had arrived, and Ryan found himself wanting to tell her everything about Grayson Technologies, about the empire he'd built, about the emptiness he'd discovered at its center. "I had responsibility," he admitted. "A lot of it. People depending on me, decisions that affected thousands of lives. And you walked away from all that to throw hay bales and fix tractors." "I needed to remember what was real," Ryan said quietly. "What mattered beyond quarterly reports and market share." Grace studied him in the porch light. "And have you remembered?" Ryan really looked at her, taking in the strength and grace that her namesake implied, the intelligence behind her eyes, the authenticity that had drawn him to her from the first moment. "I'm starting to," he said softly. The silence between them hummed with possibility. Grace's expression softened, vulnerability showing through her practical exterior. For a breathless moment, Ryan thought she might lean toward him, closing the distance between them. Instead, she gathered her papers and stood. "It's getting late. And tomorrow's another early start." "Grace," Ryan said, rising to face her. "I don't," she interrupted gently. "Not yet, not until I know who's really saying it." The perceptiveness of her comment left him speechless as she disappeared into the house, leaving him alone with the weight of secrets that suddenly felt more burdensome than ever. The following days brought a heat wave that demanded relentless work from everyone on the farm. Ryan threw himself into physical labor, grateful for the distraction from his complicated feelings for Grace and his growing uncertainty about returning to his former life. They worked side by side but maintained a careful distance, their conversations limited to necessary farm business. Ryan respected her boundaries while silently planning how he might come clean about his identity without destroying the connection they'd built. His opportunity came unexpectedly when Frank asked him to drive Grace to the neighboring town for equipment parts. Alone in the battered farm truck for the first time, the silence between them felt pointed rather than comfortable. "Are we going to talk about it?" Ryan finally asked as they passed endless fields of corn. "About what?" Grace kept her eyes on the road. "About the fact that you've barely spoken to me for days, about whatever happened on the porch the other night." Grace sighed, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. "Nothing happened, Ryan, and that's probably for the best." "Why?" "Because you're leaving," she said simply. "Because whatever you're running from is still waiting for you. Because this," she gestured to the farmland around them, "isn't your real life." "What if I want it to be?" The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. Grace glanced at him sharply before returning her attention to the road. "You don't even know what that means. You've experienced farm life at its most romantic harvest time, community gatherings, problem-solving. You haven't lived through the bone-crushing work of winter maintenance, the despair of watching crops fail after months of care, the year-after-year struggle just to break even." "I'm not naive, Grace. Aren't you? About this life, yes, I think you are." Her voice softened. "And I think I am too about whatever world you come from. That's the point, Ryan. We're from different planets." "That doesn't mean we can't find common ground," Ryan argued. Grace pulled the truck into the parking lot of the agricultural supply store and cut the engine. For a long moment, she sat staring through the windshield before turning to face him. "Who are you, Ryan? Really?" The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. Ryan took a deep breath. "My name is Ryan Grayson. I'm the CEO and founder of Grayson Technologies." Grace stared at him blankly. "It's a tech company," he continued. "We develop enterprise software solutions and artificial intelligence applications for business optimization." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "Wait, Grayson Technologies, the company that's always in the business news." She shook her head in disbelief. "You're that Ryan Grayson, the billionaire?" Ryan nodded, watching her process this revelation. "So this whole time, what, you were slumming it, getting material for some tech billionaire memoir about finding yourself through manual labor." "It wasn't like that," Ryan protested. "I had a breakdown, a legitimate collapse from stress and burnout. My doctor recommended complete removal from my normal environment. I wanted something real, something completely different from my life in tech. And you picked our farm by random chance. Your father advertised for harvest help on an agricultural job board. I applied using my middle name and last initial. No one ran a background check because, well, who would expect a billionaire to apply for farmhand work?" Grace sat in stunned silence, processing his explanation. "Why tell me now?" she finally asked. "Because I'm falling in love with you," Ryan said, the truth finally breaking free. "And I couldn't let that happen without you knowing who I really am." Grace's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and something like pain. "You're falling in love with me," she repeated flatly. "Yes. And what exactly did you expect would happen next? That I'd be so dazzled by your billions that I'd abandon the farm and move to your penthouse? Or were you planning to buy us out and turn Willow Creek into some gentleman farmer hobby?" The bitter edge in her voice cut deep. "Neither," Ryan said quietly. "I honestly hadn't thought that far ahead. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending." Grace pushed open the truck door. "We need those parts. I'm going inside." "Take some time to figure out what game you're really playing here, Ryan, or whatever your name actually is." As she walked away, Ryan sat in the truck, confronting the mess he'd created. The irony wasn't lost on him after weeks of seeking authenticity. He'd sabotaged the most genuine connection he'd found by hiding his true identity. The drive back to the farm was tense and silent. As soon as they arrived, Grace disappeared into the house without a word, leaving Ryan to unload the supplies alone. That evening, he found Frank on the porch, pipe in hand, watching the sunset with the contentment of a man who knew his place in the world. "Sir," Ryan began, "I need to tell you something." Frank listened without interruption as Ryan explained who he really was and why he'd come to Willow Creek Farm. When he finished, the older man puffed thoughtfully on his pipe before speaking. "Can't say I'm entirely surprised. You ask too many smart questions to be just some office worker." He fixed Ryan with a steady gaze. "What are your intentions toward my daughter?" The directness of the question was both startling and refreshing after years of corporate diplomacy. "I care for her," Ryan said honestly. "More than I expected to, more than is probably wise given the circumstances." Frank nodded slowly. "And the farm? What about it? Grace tells me you know about our financial situation. I assume a man in your position might see an investment opportunity." Ryan understood the implication. "I didn't come here looking for business opportunities, Mr. Johnson, and I certainly didn't anticipate developing feelings for Grace. But now that both have happened," Ryan considered his answer carefully, "if Grace would allow it, I'd like to help the farm. Not as a takeover or acquisition, but as a partner, silent or otherwise, whatever would make her comfortable." "And if she wants nothing to do with you or your money," the question hit a nerve Ryan hadn't realized was exposed. "Then I'll respect her decision and leave when my time is up, as originally planned." Frank studied him for a long moment before standing. "Grace has her mother's pride and my stubbornness. She won't make it easy for you." He clapped a hand on Ryan's shoulder. "But she's also got a heart that sees people for who they really are, not what they own or what they can offer her." As Frank headed inside, Ryan remained on the porch, watching night settle over the farm. For the first time in his adult life, his wealth and position couldn't solve the problem at hand. This was about trust, honesty, and proving that his feelings were genuine, not just a billionaire's sabbatical fantasy. The next morning, Grace was noticeably absent from breakfast. Martha explained that she'd driven to a neighboring farm to help with their harvest, a common practice of reciprocal aid in farming communities. "She'll be back tomorrow," Martha added, giving Ryan a look that suggested she'd been informed of his true identity. Ryan threw himself into farm work with renewed determination, hoping physical exhaustion might provide clarity. By evening, he had made a decision. He would offer Grace and her family a business proposition, not charity, but a genuine investment opportunity that respected their skills and knowledge while providing the capital they desperately needed. He spent the night drafting a proposal, using all his business acumen to create a plan that would preserve the farm's independence while ensuring its financial stability. When Grace returned the following afternoon, he was waiting by the barn, document in hand. "Can we talk?" he asked as she climbed down from her truck. Grace looked tired, dusty from a day in someone else's fields. "I'm not sure what's left to say." "Just hear me out," Ryan pressed. "Not about us, about the farm." Her expression hardened. "So you've decided to save us with your billions. How generous." "It's not like that, just, please read this." He held out the folder containing his proposal. Grace took it reluctantly. "Fine, but don't expect me to be grateful for whatever corporate takeover you've planned." "I don't want your gratitude," Ryan said quietly. "I just want a chance to show you that my interest in Willow Creek and in you is genuine." Grace's eyes met his briefly before she turned away, folder in hand. "I'll read it, that's all I can promise." It was a small victory, but Ryan would take it. As he watched her walk toward the house, he realized how much had changed in the weeks since he'd arrived. The man who had stepped out of the Bentley in designer shoes and custom suits had been seeking an escape from his own life. The man standing in work boots and faded jeans now was seeking a way to be part of someone else's. The following morning, Ryan was mucking out stalls when Grace found him. She looked as though she'd spent a sleepless night, but her expression was resolute. "Your proposal," she began without preamble. "It's actually solid." Ryan straightened, leaning on his pitchfork. But I can't figure out what you get out of it. The return on investment would be minimal compared to what you could make elsewhere. And the structure keeps majority control with my family." She shook her head in confusion. "It doesn't make business sense." Not every decision has to be about maximizing profit, Ryan said, says the Billionaire tech CEO, Grace replied with a hint of her usual spirit. Ryan set aside the pitchfork and moved closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. Grace, I came here looking for something real. I found it in this place, in this life, and most of all in you. And you think you can just buy your way into it? No, Ryan said firmly. I know I can't. The proposal isn't about buying anything. It's about creating a partnership that lets both of us have what we need. He took a chance and reached for her hand. You need capital to keep this place running. I need connection, purpose beyond the next acquisition or product launch. Grace didn't pull her hand away, but skepticism remained in her eyes. And when you get bored of playing farmer, when the novelty wears off, this isn't about novelty, Ryan insisted. These weeks here have been the most grounded, most authentic time of my adult life. I've never worked harder physically or been more satisfied with a day's work. He squeezed her hand gently. And I've never met anyone who challenges and inspires me the way you do. Grace studied him intently, searching for deception. I need time to think and to discuss this with my parents. Take all the time you need, Ryan said. I'm not going anywhere until my 3 months are up regardless of your decision. As Grace walked away, Ryan returned to his chores, understanding that some things couldn't be rushed or solved with money and power. This was one of those things, perhaps the most important one he'd ever faced. The Johnson family discussion must have been intense, because dinner that evening was a silent affair. Ryan respected their need to process his proposal privately, focusing on his food and answering Martha's occasional questions about his company with minimal detail. After dinner, he retreated to the farmhand quarters, giving the family space. He was surprised when a knock came at his door an hour later. Grace stood in the hallway, her expression unreadable. Walk with me. They strolled in silence toward the western field, now cleared of crops and bathed in moonlight. The night was clear and cool, stars brilliant above the open land. We've talked it through, Grace finally said. My parents and I, Ryan nodded, waiting. They're inclined to accept your proposal with some modifications. She handed him a folder, his original document with handwritten notes in the margins. Dad wants more specific language about succession planning. Mom wants guarantees about maintaining organic practices. Ryan took the folder, hope rising. And what do you want, Grace? She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. I want to know if this is really about the farm or if it's about me. Both, Ryan admitted, but they're not conditional on each other. If you want the investment but not anything else, I'll respect that. Grace's expression softened slightly. And if I said I needed time? That I'm not ready to trust whatever this is between us? I'd say that's fair, Ryan replied. Trust has to be earned. I haven't done a great job of that so far. No, you haven't, she agreed, but a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Though I suppose taking a job as a farmhand when you could be on a yacht somewhere does show a certain commitment to personal growth. Ryan laughed softly. I've never actually owned a yacht. Private jets are more practical. Grace rolled her eyes. Oh, well, in that case. They continued walking, the tension between them easing slightly. So what happens now? Ryan asked. Now, Grace said thoughtfully, we see if the Billionaire CEO can truly adapt to farm life beyond his sabbatical, if this partnership business and perhaps otherwise has any real future. And how do we test that? Grace's smile turned mischievous. I was thinking we start by having you explain to the local bank manager why Ryan Grayson of Grayson Technologies wants to invest in our modest operation. The look on Harold's face alone will be worth it. Ryan grinned, feeling lighter than he had in days. Deal. As they walked back toward the farmhouse, their hands brushed, then tentatively linked. Above them, stars scattered across the Kansas sky like possibilities waiting to be recognized, much like the potential between them, requiring only courage and honesty to flourish. 3 months later, Ryan stood in the newly renovated barn, watching as farmers and neighbors gathered for Willow Creek Farm's first community showcase. Under string lights and alongside displays of organic produce, Grace moved confidently among local restaurant owners and market representatives, promoting the farm's new direct supply program. The investment had already transformed the operation. New equipment, repaired buildings, and innovative sustainable practices that positioned Willow Creek as a model for modern family farming. More importantly, it had given the Johnsons breathing room to implement Grace's vision for the farm's future. "Quite a change from when you first arrived," Frank commented, joining Ryan by the refreshment table. "For the farm or for me?" Ryan asked with a smile. Frank chuckled. "Both, I'd say." He nodded toward his daughter. "She's in her element now, always had the ideas, just needed the resources to make them happen." "She's remarkable," Ryan agreed, watching Grace laugh with a local chef discussing specialty crops. "And what about you?" Frank asked. "Board's probably wondering when their CEO is coming back full-time." Ryan had been splitting his time between Willow Creek and his corporate responsibilities, finding a balance that felt sustainable. "They're adapting. I've got good people running day-to-day operations. And remote work has its advantages." What he didn't say was that his time at Willow Creek had fundamentally changed how he approached his company. Grayson Technologies was now developing agricultural technology specifically designed for small to mid-sized farms, a market previously ignored by major tech firms. Grace caught his eye across the room and smiled, a private, warm expression that still made his heart race after months of carefully building trust between them. Their relationship had evolved slowly, with honest conversations about their different worlds and what a future together might look like. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Ryan found Grace by the barn doors, looking out at the twinkling lights they'd installed along the driveway. "Successful night," he commented, standing beside her. "Beyond what I imagined," she agreed. "Dad says 3 neighboring farms want to implement similar programs." Ryan smiled. "Community impact already, that was fast. Turns out when you combine good ideas with actual resources, things happen." Grace bumped his shoulder playfully. "Who knew?" "Certainly not the billionaire who showed up here thinking he understood hard work," Ryan admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. Grace turned to face him, her expression growing serious. "You know, I've been thinking about that first day, how different things might have been if Dad had hired someone else, or if you'd picked another farm for your escape plan." "I'm glad I didn't," Ryan said softly. "Me too." Grace reached for his hand. "Though I'm still not convinced you know what you're getting into with this farm partnership. Quarterly reports are a lot more predictable than weather patterns." "I'm not looking for predictable anymore," Ryan replied, drawing her closer. "I'm looking for real." When Grace kissed him under the starlit Kansas sky, Ryan Grayson, billionaire, CEO, and now part-time farmer, felt the last piece of his complicated life fall perfectly into place. He had come to Willow Creek Farm searching for something authentic in a world of artifice. He had found it not only in the honest work of farming, but in the love of a woman who valued him for who he was, not what he owned. And that, he realized, was the true harvest, one worth cultivating for a lifetime.